Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy are trading places. Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, they're not just getting rich, they're getting even.
Do you have any better ideas?
Yeah, you know, it occurs to me that the best way you hurt rich people is by turning them into poor people.
Trading places. Some very funny business.
Two things, ladies and gentlemen. I know I've been gone a long time, but that's because I've been making money. I don't make money doing this. Chris doesn't pay me. He keeps all the money. That's all the profits. Please donate to me. I'll put my cash up on the screen. Second, I know you've been watching these terrible Christmas movies. You wanted something good, entertaining. You see what I do for Halloween. So I'm going to bring you Trading Places. But I'm not going to do it alone. Why? Because I'm not an egotist. I'm going to bring in the person who can become anybody. And behind the scenes, he was melting into Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy. I'm going to bring in Winio. Winio. Why is your name Winio? Huh?
Wino. I probably just spelled it
wrong. Okay. Yeah, he probably spelled it wrong, and he's also whispering. We're going to talk to him like Helen Keller tonight, folks. But I thank you, Wino, for joining us. Let's bring in the lady of the group, E Boogie. E Boogie, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Y'all make me laugh. I'm so glad to have you back, James. Oh, my God.
Thank you so much. I missed you as well. Only you, but I missed you.
That's good to hear. I missed you too, man. Come back.
In the private chat, ladies and gentlemen, there's somebody who's hating. I can feel it. I can feel it. But it gives me power and strength, and that's how I go on. Not like Michael Myers in that bum Halloween Ends movie, but actual strength and power. So coming up next, we're going to introduce Mike Knox. Mike, how are you doing? Lovely background.
Well, when someone says trading places, you got to come trading places. So thanks for having me here. I can't wait to talk about this non-Christmas great movie. Let's get to it.
There's more than one hater, folks. And last but not least, the person who is the bane of my existence, and probably yours as well.
No, he's not on tonight.
Oh, he's just backstage hating?
Yeah, he's just backstage.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, between us four and whoever else is watching this, Chris is backstage watching and hating, and I want you to know that. Now, as I said earlier, this is my movie, Trading Places. I think it came out in 1983, Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy. I picked this movie, this Christmas movie that takes place at Christmas. Dan Aykroyd dresses up as Santa. They have Christmas parties in this movie. It's snowing outside, not like in Maryland, but whatever. Because I love comedies. I love R-rated comedies because they actually go there. It's a great story. And here's the thing. A lot of times people say, James, why do you always pick these 80s movies? I got to fix the graphics on my TV. It's all grainy and everything like that. Look, not everything has to be MCU. Not everything has to be Netflix. Some things came out before those even existed, right? Here's the thing. In this movie, you see real people, and I absolutely love it. Nothing is sugar-coated. This is how people acted. This is how people thought. This is how people carried themselves. And to a certain extent, it was great. Was it perfect? No. But we don't live in a perfect society today. And it's 20, 30 years on from that. So it's going to be all right. Watch this movie if you want to have a laugh. If you get too offended and everything like that, don't watch the movie. It's not for you. Get some tissues and you'll be fine. What is this movie about? Two wealthy brothers decide to make a wager. And in doing so, they flip Dan Aykroyd's life upside down and Eddie Murphy's life upside down. And the whole point being is to see if it's nature or nurture between these two. And if Eddie Murphy will rise and if Dan Aykroyd will fall. And so everything that follows thereafter is a result of the wager between the two brothers, Mortimer and Winthrop Duke. Okay? And those are the two gentlemen that are behind me right there. But who would like to go first in best of, worst of, if we still do that? Or what did you like about this movie? What did you hate about it?
I'm a fan always saying ladies first. So E Boogie.
I was going to say, yeah, I'll go first so people don't have to look at my background but for so long. So I really enjoy this movie. I vote that it is a Christmas movie because it happens during Christmas and there's literally a Santa dress-up cameo. To me, that constitutes a Christmas movie. That being said, everybody has their own opinion. I do want to say, though, there were a few moments of this movie that I was like, okay, it feels Scrooge-ish.
Yeah.
You know, because it's definitely about wealth. It's definitely about being just an ungodly amount of wealth, accumulating that, and also playing with people's lives like they're pawns in order to continue to accumulate that wealth. But I also appreciated this like dynamic of the brothers, and just they were funny to me. I know they're supposed to be like this big bad and this villain situation, and they were, and I felt that. But they were so funny to me. I really loved the idea that they were able to toy with two men's lives at that level, and it be of no consequence to them, about as much consequence to them as a dollar. I thought that was really poetic, and yeah, this movie was just genius. It has social commentary in several different levels, from classism and to how whether a person's character is developed based on how they're groomed growing up, or if they're just like that because it's inherent to them. And I think that we learned that people are a product of their surroundings. That's the message from this film that I gathered. But with that said, then it's hard to, in black and white, look at the Duke brothers. Mm-hmm. It's hard to look at them as all bad because they're a product of their surroundings. And since that's the message of this film, hard to want them to, suffer the really terrible consequences of their actions. At the end, I'm not gonna lie, I did feel a little bit of sympathy for them because they grew on me. They're very entertaining. I mean, I didn't love Dan Aykroyd's character the entire time, but he suffered a lot. Well, the most visually in this film. Having watched him kind of lose his status, lose everyone that cared about him, once he lost his place on the totem pole and kind of lost all of his money and friends, his girlfriend, his reputation. It was really, to me, spoke to how humanity can be. And I think that Christmas does tie into that because it's like we examine our humanity around this time of year. And it's not just about materialistic things, which this movie is also about. That being said, blackface.
Lionel Joseph.
Yeah.
I mean, I will watch this movie again and again, but I don't know that it has rewatchability for me as a Christmas movie. I don't know that it will appeal to everyone for that simple aspect. Kudos to this film, though, for having Jamie Lee Curtis playing a sex worker who was human and humane, and generally just not a money-hungry, greedy person. Like, they really made an effort to show that she was a woman of integrity and character to some degree, despite, her hand in the plot in the beginning. Like, she redeemed herself, and I appreciated that too. Shouts out Dan Aykroyd and Jamie Lee Curtis for being in a second Christmas movie during this month. I thought that was cool too. All right, that's it.
Yeah, I thought you made some great points. I'm going to piggyback on some of them when it's my go round. And then one, I just want to give you credit for it also because I never looked at it in this angle. When you said that also the Duke brothers were products of their own environment. And I'll have to chew on that a little bit to see where I fall on whether or not I think what happened to them was justified. But I think you made great points. Let me just say that early. Anybody want to go next?
I'll take it, Wino, if you don't mind. Because I'm gonna start at the end there, where she started with. As I watched this movie a dozen times plus over and more times, this movie, first of all, is almost 40 years old. And I think when we're watching today's movies and we're reviewing today's movies, I think especially we have to take in consideration, like with very well put out, which I'm with you with that, Karate Man, as far as they're a product of their environment. Because as I watched this movie a bunch of times, I've never felt compassion for those guys, especially during the bathroom scene. And they roll that ER very hard. Okay. I just wasn't for them. I thought it was pretty horrible, but you're 100% right. And what we know about humanity, right? That's what they knew. That's what they learned. I'm a big fan of the little white kid in 42 when the whole crowd kept talking to Jackie Robinson saying that N-word, and he's looking all scared and wondering what's going on, and he just joins in because that's what everyone around him did. So I think that's kind of important to point that out. But I still didn't feel no sympathy for them at all. And I absolutely do love this movie. I want to say that first and foremost. And I guess I'm going to do a wino here already and give whatever it is a thumbs up already. I think this movie is just great. However, I've never thought this was a Christmas movie. I have debated this for almost my entire life between this and Die Hard. And this time around, I just said, you know what? Let me stop using just my own opinion. For me, I love what we do, entertainment world. So I'm always following whatever Hollywood says to me. Hollywood goes because this is Hollywood scripts, and Hollywood says technically, a Christmas movie is a Christmas movie because it takes place during Christmas or in the time of the season. Movies like Miracle on 34th Street came out in March. Movies that are about Christmas are movies that are centered around the holiday or Santa Claus or baby Jesus in a golden fleece manger that you wear. Okay. And that's what a Christmas movie is. Now, I love this movie, but this movie could also say it's a New Year's Eve movie because New Year's Eve happened at the conclusion of the movie with the gorilla scene like that. So, and they only had one Christmas party, but none of that aside, I'm glad you picked this movie because we don't get very many rated R movies around here. And I like that about this movie. And I love that about this movie because as a kid, I'm 8 years old watching this movie. And I'm telling my wife as I'm watching it again and again and again, I'm like, this is the first time I saw boobs that wasn't on scrambled, like screech up TV. Like Jamie Lee Curtis was a big deal back then. You know what I'm saying? So it's like watching Jamie Lee Curtis on this was just fantastic to me, right? And not just once she showed her boobs, she showed them multiple times in the movie. And just to see the dynamic now that I'm older and see how quickly Eddie Murphy's character Valentine took to being what they said the Duke said he would be and changing that way. And Dan Aykroyd, being a huge fan, this is the height of Saturday Night Live. You even see Joe Pesci in the back where he's the gorilla. Jim Belushi, I'm sorry, as the other gorilla that they took the costume from. You got guys in here like Brandon Walsh's dad. Billy Walsh is in here as the cop at the door, right? The guy who has the briefcase. He's the principal from the Breakfast Club. Like this movie is just so good on so many levels. This is my favorite genre in movies is the 80s. And I just think this movie speaks so much for that. It was just perfect. But the only part I have to say, I will say this, and I've seen this movie a dozen times. I move on to wino. When I saw the blackface, I was kind of thrown off. I'm a person who refuses to watch Tropic Thunder because of the role that, Iron Man played and Robert Downey Jr. And people tell me all the time, don't look at it that way. And I can't get past because America today has made me feel this way about anything that's close to being racist. Right. So when I see blackface all these years later, I was turned off by the part, despite Eddie playing the role. But in the 80s, and again, looking back 40 years ago, that's why I got to put that other hat on and take my feelings out of it and watch this movie and review this movie how it needs to be reviewed from where it was made in that time. It was funny. I mean, we know each other from dying. Like, wino love we doing Police Academy because of my man in the back of the police wagon, Bubba. But Eddie Murphy playing for an exchange student. Yes. Yes. It's just amazing. I love this movie, Trading Places. I'm glad you picked this movie, Trading Places. If it wasn't just so rated R, I would have my kids watch it. You know what I mean? So, and I do feel the Scrooge in there with the Dukes in there. So I'm gonna leave it right there. Wino, what you got?
Well, I mean, I found this movie to be very interesting because more than anything, it's a display of what's going on in that time.
Speak up for me, my brother, with the beautiful hoodie on, because you don't have your headphone in your ear, so we can barely hear you, my guy. The Nature Boy kicked out at 2 every time.
Okay. Well, no, because the thing is that with that, I don't know where the hell I put my headset. I'm sorry. Oh, wait a minute now. Wow. Oh, wait. So the thing about this movie is that I just found it to be very interesting for one reason and one reason only, because it was a very good description of the capitalism. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Of the capitalism in that time, right? So now, the whole experiment was basically what would happen, how would people act if they had different levels of resources. But one thing that I found interesting was Eddie, once he had that money, then, started bragging and boasting and talking about all of this other stuff and his limousine outside and all this other stuff, right? But then when people started acting up and messing up the house, then all of a sudden he started getting all civilized. You know what I mean? But
It's
then,
from Persia. It's from Persia.
exactly, like he started getting all, you know what I mean? It reminded me of Frank Lucas talking about the $5,000 alpaca. You know what I'm saying?
Damn it. Damn it.
That's what it reminded me
Yo,
of.
but you block that shit.
Yeah, block that.
Right,
Yeah, block
right. That's right. That's right. That's what it reminded me of. Like all of a sudden, they put a suit on him and he got a little bit all uppity. So I found that whole situation interesting, like because literally they just took them out of their whole dynamic. And the thing is that at that time, you could even see in one of the things there was a little frame of Ronald Reagan and what Ronald Reagan's signature. This movie had like just the whole Ronald Reagan era all over it, where there was just this hardcore capitalism and all this other stuff with that. So with that time, and then mind you, also at that time you had movies like Wall Street, where greed is good, and just the whole, just the whole mind process, just the whole thinking of like, everybody go get their Serious Seven, everybody go on Wall Street, everybody this, everybody that, and it was very interesting. And mind you, even at the end, just seeing both of them come together, come up with this plan, and then start doing all this stock trading, because at that time, um, to be a stockbroker, somebody like Eddie Murphy probably wouldn't have been in that room. You know what I mean? So like that whole thing was interesting with him taking all the sales and everything, and it was just it was amazing because in the beginning of the movie he was a wino, at least what a wino was at that time. Now winos are bums, or homeless, or whatever you want to call them. But he was a wino, or pretending to be a wino, and then all of a sudden at the end of the movie you get to see how smart he really is. But my favorite person in this movie, outside of Jamie Lee Curtis, because man, that woman ages well, bro. Like for real. Like seeing her in Cranks and seeing her in this is just like, damn.
I don't want to take
You know
this
what I
shine.
mean?
I want you to tell me who you finna
For
say. 'Cause I think
real.
I know who you finna say.
You
And I'm
know what
about
I
to
mean?
agree with you.
But no, my favorite person in this joint was the butler. I ain't gonna lie. Butler. The butler, that's just when he showed up with the Irish accent and the drink. That was funnier than all of them. Straight up. Even Jamie Lee Curtis with that whole Sweden thing was kind of corny. But straight up, like this guy is just like, the best Benson ever. Like I would love to see him as Alfred, just a funny version. Like this guy was just great. But all in all, I really like the story that they told. And this movie is rewatchable at any time. You know what I mean? I mean, like you guys said before, it's all a matter of perspective. If you lived around that time, then you're definitely gonna see it differently than if you didn't. So yeah, there's my rant for the day.
It's 40 years. It's 40 years ago.
Yeah.
I think all of you made great points, and I kind of want to touch on all of them. I'll start with the last one, with Vic, what you just said about the butler. We see how Dan Aykroyd's character interacts with him, even though, as to E's point, even though they're both white, and we see that Dan Aykroyd is as much a racist as the Duke brothers is in the movie. Okay. And arguably, we don't even know if he's no longer a racist. He just happens to know Eddie Murphy's character. That's it. That's all we really know, right? And because the movie is played so true to life, I would be led to believe that he's still a race or prejudiced, or whatever, I guess would be more accurate. He's still as prejudiced as the Duke brothers. They're not trying to string anybody up, but they have predisposed notions and ideas of who Black people are, and I'm guessing other groups, right? But we see how Dan Aykroyd's character treats the butler and talks to him, and then we see how Eddie Murphy does. Even though, as we say, at first he wants to show up. Why? Because he's never had so much affluent wealth, right, or tangible wealth, and he says, "Of course, I want to be able to show up," because in his mind, when am I going to get an opportunity to do so again, right? And I think that's true of anybody who, if you just, let's say, won the lotto, as opposed to, as people might say, you got it through the mud, right? And you're working year after year after year in this incremental growth, incremental wealth, and everything like that, and you're scrolling away, you act very different because it's come to you gradually. But if you were able to snap your fingers like that, your mentality hasn't changed from I'm eating pork and beans every night to now I'm having filet mignon whenever I want, right? So how Eddie Murphy acts is very real, but I like how they interact with all the different people. When you see Eddie Murphy, when he comes into Jamie Lee Curtis's house, he says, "Excuse me, the door's open." Now we saw the neighborhood that they walked through, and it looked run down and everything like that. And because Eddie Murphy is of the neighborhood, he probably knows what type of woman Jamie Lee Curtis is, what she does for a living. But he never talks down to her or thinks less of her. And on his interaction with her, he treats her the same as he does the Dukes. And I love how beautiful that is, and that's displayed. Whereas Dan Aykroyd's character, he would have never talked to her that way. He wouldn't even acknowledge her.
She did. Remember, he found out he was a hooker. He went kind of, "You're a hooker?" You know what I mean?
he would have thought of her less than the butler. Do you see what I'm saying? But so you see the character and who really is the standout in this. And so if everybody's saying their favorite character, I would say mine is Eddie Murphy, because he was a noble person out of everybody. He did not change. Him and Jamie Lee Curtis, I think, are the most noble people. And I'll put the butler in there to make it a triumvirate, right? But I like just how he interacted with all of them. Now, to go back to the point that he made about whether or not I feel bad for the Dukes and them being a product of the environment, I think they are a product of the environment. And I'll piggyback what you said, Mike, about the kid in 42. I feel bad for you up until the point when you do it and it becomes you. Now, you can say a person has a certain nature to them, right? But when you indulge your nature over whatever it is, over and over and over, it becomes your character. And when it becomes your character, then I don't feel bad for you. That's why I don't feel bad for what happened to Dan Aykroyd. I think Dan Aykroyd had the best luck out of anybody because it actually changed his life for the better. And then he got money. Whereas Eddie Murphy and Jamie Lee Curtis, they were already, quote unquote, good people. And we expect good to happen to good people. But Dan Aykroyd was an ass. And I would argue that he's still an ass. He just lucked up because he found good people surrounding him. Whereas before, as I think, Mike, you made the point, he never had any friends. They were always jealous. That guy was always trying to steal Penelope. Penelope never really loved him. She just loved him because he was making $80,000 in '83. And I don't know what the conversion rate of that is, but he was making a lot of money. And even to the Dukes, even though he made them consistently, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe he made $1 million deals too. We don't see that, but we know he made substantial amounts of money, right? For them, they discard him as much as anybody else because their socioeconomic ladder was high, or their position in that ladder was higher than even Dan Aykroyd's character. So they meant nothing. And Dan Aykroyd acted the same way, as I said earlier, towards the butler. He would have done the same thing towards Jamie Lee Curtis. And even Eddie Murphy, who he bumped into, he accused of being a thief. So again, I like how they're showing how everybody was, and that's how it was in the 1980s. And I know Chrissy was disagreeing. Forget about the whole it being a Christmas movie or not. That's irrelevant. But I think, see, $239,000. That's a lot of money. But to Chrissy's point, when she said that Dan Aykroyd, he dresses up almost at the end of the movie in blackface, and he's playing a character called Lionel Joseph, which is supposed to be Eddie Murphy's cousin, and they met at the foreign exchange, student thing or whatever. Now, it's so ridiculous because if you see the movie, if you haven't ever seen it, only his face is painted. Literally, his neck is as white and pink as ever. And you see it on his arms. And the guy they're trying to trick, he sees it and he knows who it is. So in a way, it's not like they're trying to, and which are the point that I want to get to Mike that he made about Tropic Thunder. Whereas RDJ's character is trying to actually be a quote unquote black man from a bad blaxploitation film of the 70s or whatever, right? Dan Aykroyd is just being a goofball. It's not played seriously. Whereas Robert Downey Jr.'s character in Tropic Thunder he's playing it as if, I'm not saying Robert Downey Jr., but his character in Tropic Thunder is playing as if, no, this is who I really am, and I'm such a method actor that I'm going to become, and I'm going to be like the author. I forget the author who wrote Black Like Me. It's stupid, and I think we use this word too much, I think, but triggers people nowadays because he's playing it as if it's real to life. Whereas Dan Aykroyd, it's so stupid. Like who the hell would believe you? And it's almost, in my opinion, poking fun at the old movies of blackface. I just saw a clip with Shirley Temple. She's supposed to have put on some black polish, and now these Union soldiers can't find her, this little Confederate girl. I forget the name of the movie, but it's a known movie that she did where she was playing a little Confederate girl, and now the Union soldiers can't recognize her because she's in blackface. Right? That's dumb, and anybody watching it today will realize it's stupid. Now it's offensive to us because our sensibility has changed, but it was offensive to people back then. They just didn't give a damn about the people who had offended.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Trading Places, it's not played as Shirley Temple or Al Jolson in The Jazz Singer or the other myriad films that he did in blackface as serious, and I would say arguably close to Tropic Thunder. This one, he's playing as stupid and goofy. Now, if it still offends you, it still offends you. What am I going to say? If you don't find somebody funny, you don't find somebody funny. What am I going to say?
Would you say in this scenario, more than other scenarios, what I know I always say, more than anything, comedy is subjective?
I think that comedy is always subjective, but I mean, in this instance, specifically talking about blackface. Now, just like, for instance, Vic made the point, the butler's coming in as a drunk Irish priest. He's making fun of the Irish. The Irish always get that they're alcoholics, they're drunks. Since the moment they came to this country, even in the UK, they say that about them. About the Scots, they say that they don't bathe, they're dirty, barbarian people. They say that to this day, right? So he's playing a drunk Irish priest. He's hitting on the Catholics and he's hitting on the Irish that they're just drunks. Then you have Jamie Lee Curtis who's coming in there dressed as Helga, but she's saying she comes from Sweden because she doesn't know what her costume's supposed to be. And that's why the butler's saying, but you're wearing lederhosen. Don't you mean you're from, Dusseldorf or, somewhere in Germany or something like that? She says, no, I'm from Sweden. What don't you? Everybody's dressed so stupid. Then you have Eddie Murphy, who's dressed as somebody from Cameroon, and he literally has a cowtail switch as if there's flies flying on him, and it's 1870. Do you see what I'm saying? All of them are dressed as ridiculous caricatures. Nobody is dressed as this is supposed to be true to life. That's why the guy says, all right, Winthorpe, what the hell is going on? That's why he goes along and he plays along. He says, no, I don't want any of your Irish whiskey, pal. I don't want any more damn jerky beef. And he says, and when Jamie Lee Curtis bends over and her breasts are all out, he says, sure, why not? I'll entertain this because she has nice breasts. He's just going, but he's not fooled at all. But if you look at Tropic Thunder, I forget the actor's name, but the one who's actually black, he says, what the hell are you doing? I have a problem with this from the start because Robert Downey Jr.'s character is playing it as real. And that would be offensive as opposed to I'm playing a jackass. You see what I'm saying? So that's why personally it doesn't bother me because it's not a malicious intent done, and they're all goofballs. You know what I mean? As opposed to you're actually trying to say that this is what people act like. And in my final thought, I'll give an example of what I think is more offensive personally than Dan Aykroyd dressed in whatever they used to make him black.
Well, with that being said, because I got to say it, hey, we're going to take a small break, play some commercials, play some bills, and you can pay them too. Like, follow, and subscribe. All right, we got other Christmas movies or non-Christmas movies coming out. Check out what we got coming up next, y'all.
My first save, there was this little sick kid. What did they call him?
It was Tiny Tim.
No. Sweet kid, one crutch.
Nope.
Little Larry.
No, Tiny Tim.
Micro Mike. Super small Steve.
Holy.
It is our job to protect the children of the world. For as long as they believe in us, we will guard them with our lives. That dream is over. It's time for fear to rule the world. We have never faced a greater threat.
Buckle up! We're the bloody seatbelts! Ha!
That was just expression.
No. When it's just us decorating, it kind of feels like child labor.
Honey, it's not labor if we don't pay you.
Yeah.
It's the most wonderful time.
Slowly, I could feel the Christmas ember beginning to glow again.
coming your way in the coming days and week, hopefully. Get them out there, people. Look for them, y'all. Reviewing these Christmas movies. What y'all like? Comment below. Let us know your favorite Christmas movies and your non-favorite Christmas movie. You know, like Gremlins. That's more of a Christmas movie than Die Hard, y'all. Just saying. Just saying. Karate Man, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Of course, I picked this movie, so that means I like it. Interesting thing on blackface. I just saw a piece on Al Jolson, and of course, he did the first speaking movie called The Jazz Singer, the sound movie, which they call The Speak. But anyway, and then they went on to say that actually he, in his own time, was a big proponent and advocate for African Americans, then colored people of the era, and actually would try and promote them, and he would actually fight and advocate for them and would go to bat for them. Yet he made these films in blackface. And they said one of the reasons why he did The Jazz Singer in blackface was because that was his way of being able to introduce it to a white audience, because he knew that if a black person was in it, they wouldn't go watch it. So I find it very interesting. I always think that life is gray, and that people who are very cut and dry, I kind of am dubious of them, because nobody is like that. And so when they say, well, forget them, or I'm writing them, or we say, nah, everybody wants to cancel everybody, be very careful with that. Because at some point, the finger's going to be pointed at you, and you yourself know that you are imperfect. So be very careful and try and understand why something was done, when it was done, and understand that everything is a photograph in a certain regard. This movie gets a thumbs up for me.
O.E. Boogie.
I would just like to say that Tropic Thunder's blackface was also making fun of itself. But that aside, this movie is rewatchable for me every and any Christmas or holiday season. It's a very smart movie, and it really piggybacks on those seasonal themes, particularly looking at class and how it impacts our character as people. And for that reason, I think this is a very good movie. It's got a star-studded cast, and it's a thumbs up for me.
I'm just gonna go next, and I'm gonna leave a thumbs up there because we already know what Wino's gonna say, because he never gives a thumbs down to any movie. So spoiler alert, spoiler alert. We know Wino's gonna give this movie a thumbs up. So, but everything that you said, E Boogie, and actually what's been said, I agree. This movie is just brilliant to me on every facet. I love very much, Karate Man, how you, although long-winded there, and who am I to say somebody's long-winded, because I talk an awful lot, made perfect sense about the comedy and how easily you could tell he knew who they were. And you're right. As you saying that, I'm watching him, you know what I mean? Well, I'm always going to call him the principal from The Breakfast Club. Look at them like, never once has he looked fooled at all. In that scene, he's more surprised that the big gorilla punks him in the back in the case than he was throughout the whole thing. But Mortimer and Duke, and no, people, this is not Coming to America is not a sequel to Trading Places, because they shared one little smart where he gave the bums the money and it happened to be Mortimer and Winston Duke. Okay, that does not make it a sequel, but absolutely thumbs up. How can you not watch this movie? I'm going through Will Smith's book right now, and he talks about how he knows every single line from Eddie Murphy in this entire movie, and I have to concur with him with that. And Eddie Murphy is the star of the movie. He got top billing in this movie. You think you're watching, you think it's Dan Aykroyd's movie. It's not. It's Eddie Murphy's movie, and I thought that was brilliant. And if you go back and watch Saturday Night Live at that time in that era, just like they do now with how Will Ferrell and them came to be, they put their people in good positions, and they did that with Eddie Murphy with this one. And I think this is a movie that really launched his career more than anything else, was Trading Places. Wino Vic, thumbs up, thumbs down. Shock somebody.
Well, Dan Aykroyd at the time was big off of Ghostbusters. Eddie Murphy was big off of 48 Hours and Saturday Night Live. So it was a nice pairing, and the story that they told was really, really good. And it more than anything, it shows at least the sentiment of the time that America is the shining city on a hill. And so, And then you know how not more than anything, like the moral of the story is stay humble because you never know. You could lose it all one day. You know what I mean? And then like with the movie that that follows this coming to America, if that is the movie, because these are all connected. I think that it's great how you get to see Eddie Murphy still rich, and then these two show up as poor people with a kind of like a continuance. So I think it's great. You know, if we ever connect all those movies together, which I think we should, I think it would be nice because just this whole story is just is really good and very realistic.
So is that
Oh,
a
clearly
thumbs up?
thumbs up. Yeah.
Okay. And I hate to be that guy, but you know me already, Wino. I'm that guy. This movie came out before Ghostbusters and 48 and Beverly Hills Cop 48 Hours. I had to Google it just to make sure that I was correct.
Oh,
This
word.
movie launched their careers in other
Nice.
stratospheres. It really did. And that's just something that we talked about amongst the tables playing spades, which you should learn how to play that whenever you're ready. I'll teach you. Karate Man, take us on out of here, buddy.
Thank you for tuning in. As Mike said, we had a couple of movies lined up for Christmas. Guardians. I forget the other two. One of them looked really interesting. It's not Guardians. But Chris will be there. He's been very excited to do Guardians, and you should tune in for that. So thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. I take none of you for granted.
Don't lie.
And people, make sure you check us out.
False. You all did not talk about everything that you have going on. And
I was going to say that. You didn't have to come on the
Go ahead, because I did something I added. So go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, okay. Do you know when these movies are taking place? No, you don't. Okay. So Rise of the Guardians will be taking place tomorrow. E is going to let us know when Spirit is taking place. I'm pretty sure we'll have that information on all our social media tomorrow, as well as Christmas Story Christmas. But on Thursday, we're having our first ever conglomerate, our combined UPR year-end awards produced by UPR Wrestling and UPR Entertainment. Do you have something to say, Mr. Knox?
I was going to say all that. That's all. Hey, ho.
Right, but that's not all.
If
But
you're going to be on the show, be on the show. That's
if you would like to talk about
one thing we do on UPRE is professionalism. And I'm so grateful for tonight's episode and those who tuned in. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great night.
That's totally off. That's not even everything. But go ahead and wrap it up.